Chernobyl, looking back on an abandoned ghost town's 30 years after the nuclear disaster. The 1986 Chernobyl disaster was the worst nuclear power plant accident in history. The accident was a result of a mismanaged test at the Soviet nuclear plant, leaving clouds of nuclear matter spreading across the western USSR and Europe. The original death toll reached 31 people, most of whom were reactor staff and emergency workers. However, this number rose significantly when people contracted radiation-related illnesses, such as cancer, in the following months. The nuclear disaster happened during a systems test at reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl plant, close to Pripyat, a Ukrainian town that was heavily affected by the disaster and has now been completely abandoned. Between 600,000 to 800,000 firefighters and emergency workers were called to the area and remained there for over 2 years, burying radioactive equipment. A concrete sarcophagus was hastily built over the site of the stricken reactor to contain the worst of the radiation, but a more permanent solution has been in the works since late 2010. As I was working on my story, USA Today was also working on another. I recommend giving it a read. They traveled there to study the effects on the people and city as of today. A link can be found below this story. Stay paranoid, my friends. At 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986, an explosion destroyed reactor number 4 at Chernobyl's Vladimir Ilyich Lenin nuclear power station in the former Soviet Union. 30 years later, 5 million people still live on heavily contaminated lands in Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine, and hundreds of thousands of people are sick or suffering in different ways. The true impact from Chernobyl may not be known for decades to come. The blast immediately killed one person. A second died in the hospital after succumbing to injuries. While the reactor burned for 2 weeks, discharging the largest ever uncontrolled amount of radioactive material into the environment, the radiation that spewed from the plant reached 42% of Europe's territory and prompted the deployment of an army of 800,000 emergency workers. Chernobyl, an area the size of Rhode Island, will not be radiation-free, if ever, for at least 24,000 years. It took then-Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev 18 days to appear on television to admit the scale of the disaster and another 3 years to lift a ban on releasing public health data. To this day, cancer and death toll estimates are in a shockingly wide range, from 4,000 to as high as 1 million. Meanwhile, the two countries affected the most, Belarus and Ukraine, are preoccupied with fighting other battles: sanctions, separatists, corruption, poverty, indifference. USA Today traveled to this still-scarred area to share stories of those living in the shadow of the world's worst nuclear disaster.